Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. My studio renovations continue. I'm in a new studio that isn't quite done yet. If there is an echo, I apologize because I'm looking out onto a huge empty space and I need a curtain put here. All of this is like nicely acoustically treated, but that's a mess. Anyway, welcome back to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. As always, I'm your host, Simon. This one written by Emma, thank you. The Epstein Files, it continues. Who is Howard Lutnick? Let's find out, shall we, Emma? Wasn't this the dude who was like, oh, I forgot to turn the light off. Does that look somewhat better? This is my first ever time recording in this dude. Oh, now he looks very dark. Hold on. Still too fucking bright. Lovely. Okay. With that out of the way, let's jump in.
If you've ever Googled yourself, you've probably found out that your information is scattered all across the internet, which isn't very nice. It can be on people's search sites, sketchy databases, even court record aggregators. It is being collected, it is being sold, and it is being reused by companies that you've never heard of to make you a target, whether that is for commercial purposes or for scamming purposes or even for stalking purposes, which is pretty scary. But Incognito, today's sponsor, is a privacy service that finds those sites and gets your info taken down. You give them permission one time, they do the rest. Behind the scenes, they're contacting hundreds of data brokers and following up until your data is gone. Plus, they've got something called custom removals, which comes with their unlimited plan. This means that you can submit any link you like, say something trellis.law or unicourt.com, and their team will try to remove your personal info manually, even if it's not in the automated system. So take your personal data back with Incognito. Use the code unknown at incognito.com/unknown to get 60% off an annual plan. That's incognito.com/unknown, code unknown. And now back to today's episode.
So Howard Lutnick, he's the dude who was like, I never met Jeffrey Epstein again after he seemed to be a weirdo. And then it's like, yeah, but you did, Howie, didn't you? Allegedly. These days, it feels like everyone and their dog knows that Jeffrey Epstein was an enormous piece of shit who's definitely burning in hell for his crimes. If he's dead, Emma. No, he's dead. He's dead. The question is whether he killed himself. And honestly, I don't think so. Like, I've done videos about Jeffrey Epstein because videos about Jeffrey Epstein do well on YouTube. But I just feel like he was too much of a narcissist and a psycho to kill himself. So I'm in on the conspiracy train on this one. Some of the most influential members of Western society are now claiming that they had no idea that old Jeffy was a big bad, and that they only became aware of his interests in women on the younger side in July 2019 after he was charged with sex trafficking minors. Since then, we've learned that a lot of them hadn't just known what he'd been up to, they were listed as his clients or regularly visited his islands where most of the abuse took place. Of course, since his death in August 2019, RIP, or don't, it has become common practice for these people to deny any involvement in his crimes, but as we know, the internet is forever. Now with the release of the first 2 batches of the Epstein Files, we're being flooded with proof that some of the most influential members of our society have been lying to us this whole time, with commentators gleefully pointing out that these people should be burned at the stake for having the audacity to be on a first-name basis with a man like Jeffrey Epstein. Look, if you're on a first-name basis with Jeffrey... Like, I'm on a first-name basis with plenty of people that I don't know particularly well. You know, isn't... I don't know, I just feel like in the modern world, we call a lot of people by their first names. For me to call someone Mr. So-and-so, I'd feel it a bit weird. Like, maybe... I'm just trying to think, like... Anyone I meet professionally, I'd probably address them by the first name. I'd maybe call my doctor, but that's it. I don't think it's... And there's a big difference between calling Jeffrey Epstein, Jeffster, by his first name or whatever, or going to his island. If Jeffrey Epstein's managing your money or whatever the fuck he did for business, it's really different than him being like, you know, doing whatever weird shit he did. One of those people is the United States Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. But who is he, and what does the Epstein Files reveal about the relationship that he had with the disgraced investment banker and convicted PDF file? The Crimes of Jeffrey Epstein et al. Now, first of all, we need to establish a timeline for the events surrounding Epstein's crimes. Epstein's perversions reportedly started rearing their ugly heads between 1974 and 1976 when Epstein worked as a private school teacher. He was in his early 20s and reportedly engaged in some inappropriate behavior toward the female students. He was subsequently fired for underperforming at his job, and one of the parents of his students offered him a position at Bear Stearns, an investment bank, where he quickly made a name for himself, which is the most incredible case of falling upwards that I've ever heard. It'd be like, oh no, I got fired from my job because I wasn't very good at it. And yeah, I might have been a bit inappropriate to students as well, but one of their dads gave me a job at Bear. It's like, and up you go, whoops-a-daisy. By the 1980s, he was already mixing with the who's who of New York society, and by the early 90s, he was on a first-name basis with politicians, billionaires, and Saudi princes. He was involved in quite a few shady business deals and reportedly started hosting aspiring Victoria's Secret models at his house in New York. It was around that time that he also started preying on young girls by promising to make their biggest dreams come true in exchange for sexual favors. If anyone is ever promising to make your biggest dreams come true, and all you have to do is, don't. Just don't do that. I know I'm speaking from a position as just a dude, but it's like, please don't. And also dudes, what the fuck? Don't do that. It's fucking weird, bro. In July 2006, Epstein was arrested at Palm Beach, Florida, on one charge of procuring a minor for sex work and solicitation. Epstein pleaded not guilty and was let go on a $3,000 bond. The FBI took over the investigation, and in May 2007, federal prosecutor Marie Villafaña drafted an indictment that was 53 pages long and explained that they wanted to charge Epstein with 60 different counts of sexual abuse, solicitation, etc. This led to the infamous non-prosecution agreement, which essentially shut down the investigation into Epstein's crimes in exchange for his spending 18 months in prison. And just to point out, it's like, what was it, 60 different counts of sexual abuse, solicitation, etc. And some of them with young, very young, illegally young girls. And he got 18 months in prison. And by the way, it's not in this script, but it's also, we've done a lot of videos about Epstein. He got like not house arrest, but like work release or whatever. So he could just go to his office for like 12 hours a day or whatever and just come back to prison in the evening. Eat a meal, go to bed, wake up, go to work. Dude, what the fuck? So technically, that means that anyone who regularly dealt with him should already known at this point that he was a convicted sex offender. After all, one of the stipulations of the non-prosecution agreement was that he had to register as one. But his crimes weren't as well known at the time and barely made any news headlines, partly due to the fact that they were allegedly covered up in order to protect the number of influential people who were implicated in his crimes. Also, until like 2019 or whatever, Jeffrey Epstein was not like a particularly well-known name, right? Like he was in the background, in the shadows, he was never seeking publicity. He was always seeking power and more depraved shit. As we know, he only ended up serving 13 months in prison, or should I say house arrest, since he was free to go to the office and would continue to sexually assault young women in his apartment while he was in jail for being a sex offender. The fuck? How is that justice? That is so far from justice. After his release, it was business as usual. Epstein continued acting as a financial advisor to the elite. He regularly donated large amounts of money to fundraisers and charities, and he continued to curry favor with some very influential people by supplying them with the kind of entertainment that only a monster would enjoy. In June 2018, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York ruled that Epstein's non-prosecution agreement didn't apply to them, so the FBI in New York reopened the investigation into his crimes. They identified up to 93 women who'd been trafficked and sexually assaulted by Epstein and his inner circle, and Epstein was arrested on the 6th of June 2019. It's at that point, like, again, in this previous video we made, I'm like, you're going to prison forever, there's no chance. But then it's like, he also has, like, allegedly or whatever, all of this, like, blackmail material on people. So he's like, yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to roll over on some really powerful people and get away with it. The next day, the FBI searched his properties and confiscated his electronics, as well as his videotapes, CDs, sex toys, photographs, his massage table, various documents, including several fake passports, and envelopes full of cash. Wait, I thought he just had an Austrian passport. I thought it was no, it was in a different name, right? How'd you get a fake EU passport? Surely you can't travel on it, right? Because the system, you got to be on a system. I mean, I think we were making a video about fake passports or something, and it's making a video. I was looking into it for some reason. I was just interested in it. And it's like, you can steal a passport and travel on it, but then when it gets reported stolen, it's going to be a big problem. So it's very risky. Anyway, Epstein's island, Little St. James, was raided on the 12th of August 2019, and the FBI confiscated his surveillance system, CCTV footage, numerous CDs, DVDs, hard drives, laptops, desktops, employee records, logbooks, photographs, cameras, etc. The news of his crimes made international headlines, and some of his acquaintances, like Bill Gates, would later point out that they only became aware of the full extent of his crimes when his victims started coming forward and telling their sides of the story. Now, of course, Epstein died in prison in August 2019, and the FBI and the US Attorney's Office seemingly stopped their investigation into his crimes and would end up turning their attention to Epstein's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, instead, who is in prison for 20 years? Where she belongs? Now, during her trial, some of the documents relating to Epstein's crimes became available to the public, and we learned that well-known politicians, businessmen, entertainers, billionaires, and princes had close ties with Epstein. When the investigations into Epstein's crimes came to an end, Epstein's victims started campaigning for the release of the Epstein files in a bid to force the Department of Justice to prosecute the people who'd abused them. As we know, their wish was finally granted in November 2025 when Donald Trump was forced to sign the Transparency Act, and the first batch of documents was released in December 2025. Following the release of the second batch of Epstein files, the influential people being mentioned in those files are being accused of terrible crimes, and one of the people whose name has popped up hundreds of times in the files is Howard Lutnick. On the 7th of February 2026, the New York Times happily reported that Howard Lutnick's name appears up to 250 times in the Epstein files. As of the 8th of February 2026, Republicans and Democrats alike are calling for Howard Lutnick to resign from his post. Bro, when both sides of the party line are saying, like, you gotta resign, dude. You gotta resign. You gotta resign. Like, Keir Starmer right now is the Prime Minister of the UK, and lots of people are calling for him to resign, but I think his party's behind him, right? So he's not gonna resign. But if your party is also like, dude, what the come on, lay it out. Otherwise we're gonna, I need your letter of resignation on my desk. This kind of situation, right? This, of course, follows the news that several international government officials, such as Peter Mandelson, Miroslav Lajcek, and Mona Jewel. Who's Mona Jewel? Miroslav Lajcek's the Slovakian guy, right? They have all been removed from their posts because of their past involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. But is there a slight chance that maybe, just maybe, the public should do a little bit more research before they jump the gun and cancel everyone who's mentioned in the files? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Plenty of people were mentioned in the files, and it's just like, in passing. Like, they wouldn't have anything to do with it. They were just, their name was in there, because there's millions of files, and some people are really prominent. Who is Howard Lutnick? And to be fair, I'm always, I think people should have the benefit of the doubt. People should be innocent until they're proven guilty, or just there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. Lutnick is a native New Yorker, and one of 3 children born to Solomon and Jane Lutnick. He was a Division III tennis champion player who would go on to study for a degree in economics at Haverford College. I don't know what a Division III tennis champion player is, though. Does that mean you're like 4th? So you got like regular league, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3? Does that mean you're actually, I guess you're still like really good compared to like regular people, but is that competitive level? I don't know how like sports work in America. In his junior year at high school, his mother had passed away from cancer, and during his first few weeks at college, his father Solomon also passed away after the hospital he was being treated at for his colon cancer accidentally gave him the wrong medication and caused his death. Fucking hell, dude. I know hospitals can be quite dangerous or whatever, but let's not give people the wrong medication. When the news of his father's death reached the school, and the then president of Haverford College, Robert Stevens, offered to waive his tuition fees, and Lutnick happily accepted the offer. Wow, good guy, president of Haverford College. Fucking shout out. He graduated in 1983 and went on to work as a finance broker. He was eventually mentored by B. Gerald Cantor. I've heard of him. He's a notable banker, right? The founder of the US financial services firm Cantor Fitzgerald, there we go. And in 1990, he was appointed as Cantor's successor. He eventually, 7 years after graduation, and you're being appointed Cantor from Cantor Fitzgerald's as it taking his position? Aren't you going to be like 30 years old? Goddamn. He eventually took control of the firm after Cantor passed away from kidney failure in July 1996 and would remain CEO until his appointment as Secretary of Commerce in February 2025. Lutnick and his wife, Alison Lambert, have been married for 31 years, and they've got 4 children. He's known for being a successful businessman and philanthropist. Cantor Fitzgerald lost 650 employees during the 9/11 attacks, which included his younger brother Gary. Oh man, fuck man, that sucks. Both your parents dying of cancer before you're out of your 20s, and then your brother dying on 9/11. That sucks. I'm sorry, man. Whatever you're in the Epstein files for. That fucking sucks. He then donated $1 million to the Cantor Fitzgerald Foundation and established the Cantor Fitzgerald Relief Fund to raise money for the family members of 9/11 victims. Since then, Lutnick and his wife have been involved in raising funds for breast cancer awareness, hurricane relief, and other natural disasters. He's also one of the biggest benefactors of Haverford College and the library, the athletic center, the Cantor Fitzgerald Gallery, and the tennis and track center is named after him. God damn, dude, you are giving. Whoever that guy was who was waived your tuition fees, oh boy, did he get it paid back in spades. It's got to be good, right? They're just be like, yeah, I know some of you guys are going to get super rich and come back and benefit us. And, you could be, you get a vibe. You get a vibe for some people. I mean, yeah, you're going to come back, you're going to come back, Howie. You're going to give generously. We're going to name buildings after you, Howie. He also used to be a Democrat and had once raised funds in support of Hillary Clinton's election campaign. I automatically like people who flip-flop. If you were once a Democrat and you became a Republican, or you were a Republican and became a Democrat or whatever, or in the UK, Conservative Labour and vice versa, I'm like, people are like, oh, you're a bit flip-floppy. And it's like, no, you just changed your mind. You got more information, or you changed your opinion on something. And I think that's a good thing. Whatever you think about him, Donald Trump used to be a Democrat, then became a Republican, or Republican, then Democrat, then Republican, or whatever. It's like, yeah, because he changed his mind about stuff, right? Or it was whatever suited him better at the time. And I'm like, it feels like people say it's a negative when it's like, oh, you're just changing your vote because it suits you better now. And it's like, yeah, it's called fucking voting. That's what it's for. Would I vote differently as a person with money, as a person with no money? Of course, because now I am selfishly interested in my own things. You should vote in the way that preserves your best interests. Based on all available information, he seems to be a decent guy. Yes, so far, I really like this guy. He seems pretty good. Well, as decent as a big corporate CEO turned politician could be. I mean, I don't like lumping people into because he's a CEO of an investment bank, he must be a terrible person. He seems like a genuinely talented person who gives a lot of money away. There have been some rumors about alleged shady business deals. Sure, there are going to be rumors about shady business deals for anyone who is in any way successful. I'll go on Reddit and I'll see weird shit about me that's just not true, but people are just wildly speculating on. And I'm just like, all right. I mean, it doesn't really bother me because it's not true, but it is weird. He'd once sued one of his old assistants for threatening to sell the private emails and texts he'd shared with his wife. I mean, as you fucking should. I would sue that. I would absolutely do the same. And the more recent coverage of him is in regard to some of his more controversial statements that he's made after being appointed Commerce Secretary. But as far as we could tell, he's never been accused of sexual misconduct. So what exactly was he doing hanging out with someone like Jeffrey Epstein? Again, at the risk of defending this guy, there's 2 sides to Jeffrey Epstein. There's Jeffrey Epstein, the power broker, who was behind the scenes making deals and making money. And then there's Jeffrey Epstein, the pervert. Just because you had to be in touch with Jeffrey Epstein or he was useful to you in a professional capacity, especially before there was proof about what he was up to, is different from the perverted side of his person. To really understand why people are now calling for Howard Lutnick's head, you first need to know about the interview he granted to Miranda Devine, the host of the podcast Podforce One. The episode in question was published on the 1st of October 2025, and within the first 2 minutes of the interview, Miranda points out that Howard knows a lot of influential people, such as Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, and Jeffrey Epstein. Was Charlie Kirk? I know Charlie Kirk got shot and all of that, but I'd never heard of him before he got shot. And I mean, rip and all that, but Donald Trump and Elon Musk are some of the most notable people of our time. Charlie Kirk was an influencer who got shot in the face. And I mean, I'm sorry, but are you really that influential? Maybe he's a bigger deal in the States or something, I don't know. Miranda then goes on to question Howard about his relationship with Epstein, seeing as how his name was once again gracing headlines all over the US thanks to the ongoing requests for the publication of the Epstein files. During the interview, Howard explains that he and Jeffrey Epstein used to be neighbors, and that the first time he met Epstein was shortly after he and his family moved into number 11 East 71st Street in New York in 2005. According to Howard, Epstein's assistant knocked on their door one day to invite them over for coffee. They agreed, and they walked over to Epstein's home, where they were introduced to Epstein, who was then mostly known for being a successful businessman and the founder of J. Epstein & Company. They have coffee, and then Epstein offers to take them on a tour of his house, which Howard describes as being really big. And I imagine it is really big, because the guy who's CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald probably also lives in a really big house. So this is probably a really, really big house. A massage table is covered in white linen cloth standing in the middle of one of the rooms, and it was surrounded by candles. According to Howard, I say to him, a massage table in the middle of your house? How often do you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me and says, and the right kind of massage. If this happened to me, I'd just assume it was an off-color joke. Like, I know people who have I personally don't like massages. I don't like people touching me who I don't know. But I wouldn't find it that weird. I'd just be kind of like, oh, he's doing like bro humor. He doesn't know I'm not really a bro. And I'd probably just be like, hey. I wouldn't think it's creepy. I just think it was a weird off-color joke. According to Howard, he and his wife both thought that Epstein was suggesting that he regularly was receiving the kind of massage that had a happy ending. Well, that's definitely what he's implying, which they naturally found to be weird and completely inappropriate. According to Howard, they left, yeah, that's actually true. If it was just me taking a tour of his house and he said that, I'd be like, hey. But if my wife was there, I'd be like, bro, it's not just the boys. According to Howard, they left soon after, and both he and his wife reportedly agreed that they'd never be in the same room as that disgusting person ever again. Of course, back in 2005, only Epstein's inner circle was aware that he preferred women to be on the wrong side of 18, and that he was a huge pervert. There might have been rumors that Epstein was a sleazeball and a huge piece of shit, but we can't know that for a fact. However, following the release of the second batch of Epstein files, news outlets happily pointed out that Howard and Epstein regularly interacted with each other in the years that followed. This then led to the public calling for his head on a spike, and in a post on X, Representative Robert Garcia from California declared that, quote, it's now clear that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has been lying about his relationship with Epstein. He said he had no interactions with Epstein after 2005, yet we know they were in business together. Lutnick must resign or be fired, and he must answer our questions. I'm sorry, but he's allowed to lie. It's not like, was it Clinton who was impeached not for, doing some, sexually weird stuff, but for lying? For perjuring himself? Just lying about shit is not... People lie all the fucking time. If people are like, oh yeah, are you friends with Jeffrey Epstein? Fucking no. I mean, obviously I wasn't friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but if I was, I'd still be like, fucking no. And there's the documents come out and you're like, hey, I mean, what did you want me to say? Yeah, no, we were tight. I just want... No. But what exactly do the emails reveal about Howard Lutnick? Old buddy, old pal? If I were to type Howard Lutnick's name into a search bar in the Epstein archives, you'll find that he is mentioned over 100 times in the files. In fact, 143 documents contain his name, but the contents of those documents aren't as damning as you might think. Of those 143, at least 3 were duplicates, so that leaves us with 140 that mentioned him. One of the documents contains an email dated the 19th of October 2009, in which Lutnick's assistant asked if they could have Epstein's contact information, since Lutnick wanted to get in touch with him. Okay, when was this? 2011, and when did he go? 2005, so it's 6 years after he went into his house and was weirded out. Then there are 34 documents that contain a set of emails that were shared between Epstein and his assistants in March of 2011, in which they confirmed that Howard Lutnick wanted to arrange a time in which he could call Epstein. It literally took them almost a week to sort out the logistics, but the call finally took place on the 5th of April 2011, and they arranged to meet up for drinks on the 1st of May 2011. Then there are 15 emails about Epstein's schedule for Sunday the 1st of May, which shows that Lutnick had a 5 p.m. appointment with Epstein, and he would end up spending approximately an hour at Epstein's house. Based on another set of emails, we know that the meeting did take place because Lutnick forgot his phone at Epstein's house, and their assistants later arranged for it to be returned to him. According to Epstein's, how do you forget your phone? It's 2011. I guess it is 2011. It's not quite like, were the Blackberries were? Yes, of course Blackberries were around. I'm surprised he forgot his phone then. I feel like a dude who runs an investment bank pretty much lives on a BlackBerry, right? Or maybe his assistant does. But then why would he have one? I feel it weird. According to Epstein's schedule for that day, he also had dinner with Woody Allen and his wife, Soon Yi, and several others at 6:30 p.m. And at 8:30 p.m. he attended a dinner at the home of Vera Wang. He had 2 dinners, greedy bastard. In December 2012, Lutnick's wife emailed Epstein and asked if he was going to be visiting his private island, Little St. James, over the holidays. Lutnick and his family were going to be on holiday in the area and they planned to stop by with their yacht. There are 15 documents related to the arrangements for their visit, which turned out to be a simple afternoon lunch with the kids. The next day, Epstein sent them a courtesy email to thank them for the visit. So far, this is entirely normal business interaction as far as we know. And he might think Epstein's a bit weird, but this is before there is any criminal stuff against him, for sure. He might just think he's a bit of a weirdo. And to be fair, he is. But if he needs something out of him, it's entirely reasonable. You can't just not interact with people in a business situation because you think they're a bit weird. If you need something from them, if they're going to be able to do business with you, you're just like, okay, you're a bit weird. Obviously, if he had known that he was a sexual predator, then it would be a very different conversation, but he doesn't, as far as we know. There's another set of 34 emails between Epstein, his assistants, and Lutnick's assistants regarding a $50,000 donation Epstein made to one of the charities that Lutnick and his wife supported, as well as invites to other fundraisers and charitable events. Based on the emails, Epstein didn't attend these events. In one of the emails, he informs Lutnick's assistant that they could fill his table with whoever they wanted. And then there are 17 emails about random stuff like construction that was taking place on their block, and Epstein and Lutnick's concerns that the view of Central Park was going to be obstructed as a result. You have a view of Central Park from your house? That's a rich person shit. There were emails in which Epstein's assistant suggested they use the same building contractor that Lutnick had, an email in which Epstein wanted the contact details for Lutnick's nanny. Okay, that's a bit shady, but Lutnick wasn't involved in the conversation. And one set of emails from a contractor that wanted to know where Epstein wanted an aircon installed. Lutnick's only mentioned in those emails because the contractor said that one of the walls in question was the one shared by Epstein and Lutnick. Okay, well, this is normal neighbor shit. It's like, if one of my neighbors in my building turned out to be Harvey Weinstein, be like, oh my God, I can't believe Simon lived in the same building. It's like, well, I didn't choose him. And he doesn't. That would be weird. He's in prison. Forever? I think he's in prison forever, right? Wait, No, they didn't let him out. Who did they let out? On some, discrepancy? Who was it? Was it Bill Cosby? Did Bill Cosby get out of prison? I think so. The only really interesting documents are the 2 tips that were called into the FBI following Epstein's death, in which it suggested that Howard Lutnick might have been involved in some Ponzi schemes or that he was guilty of laundering money. This guy is the head of a massive investment bank, and he's going to have a lot of people who don't like him or whatever. And I think people just accusing someone who's in high finance of being in a Ponzi scheme or money laundering is probably not super unusual. It's like the president getting death threats or something. I don't know why I feel like I'm defending him because I don't think he's done anything wrong. So far, we got 2 pages left. The people who'd called in these tips also mentioned that they knew Epstein and Lutnick had some business dealings in the past, so maybe Lutnick was a big old pedo. That feels like a bit of a stretch. However, they did admit that they didn't have any proof to back up their claims. Kind of important when you're throwing out accusations like that, accuser. According to these documents, the FBI did look into the allegations, but none of their inquiries indicated that either Lutnick or his company, Cantor Fitzgerald, was guilty of any wrongdoing. Another interesting email is a request for information from the FBI on behalf of the Secret Service, which was running a background check on Howard Lutnick before his appointment to the US Commerce Secretary. Obviously, it came back clear because he got the job. Yeah, that vetting to be Secretary of Commerce is going to be fucking thorough. And I don't think if he's guilty of money laundering, or there's sniffs of it, he's going to get the job because it would look really bad for Trump. Or this is a Trump appointment, right? I don't know. At no point whatsoever is Howard Lutnick accused of sexual misconduct. At most, he spent a few hours on the island in total with his entire family in tow. He didn't travel to the island on his own or as a passenger on one of Epstein's planes. He didn't spend entire days lounging around Epstein's island in his underwear, and he isn't in any of the photos that were confiscated by the FBI. And yes, it's obvious that despite his claims that he once promised that he would never be in the same room as Epstein, he must have spent some time around Epstein in the years that followed. After all, we know that they had at least 2 business meetings over the years, and all these meetings took place after Epstein had to register himself as a convicted sex offender. Oh, I'm sorry, this was afterwards. Oh, right, because, sorry, I'm getting 2009 and 2019, or 2011 and 2019 confused, because 19 when he was arrested for the last time, and then he was about a decade before that. It was known that he was a weirdo. Okay, that's not so hot, my dude. But again, I don't know, I wouldn't do business with someone like that if I knew about it. Nah, it feels dirty. Because it is. But is it proof that Howard Lutnick is a bald-faced liar, or did he simply not consider their limited interactions as being worthy of an hour-long discussion on a podcast? After all, oh wait, he just said this casually on a podcast? Oh my god, it's not even like he was oh my god, he's just like, I don't want to talk about it then. That's a lie to move the conversation on. After all, it's entirely possible that back in October 2025, he had no idea that his name was going to come up in those files, so he wouldn't have had any reason to establish a valid reason as to why he had several business dealings with a man whom he knew was guilty of some heinous crimes. However, it does raise the question of why people like Lutnick, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, and others continue to have a relationship with someone like Epstein, and one of the email exchanges between Richard Branson and Epstein might just provide us with the answer. It's entirely possible they weren't aware of the full extent of his crimes. Yeah, I think Richard Branson, I don't know, as billionaires go. I mean, I don't naturally have a problem with billionaires that some people have. Like, people are like, he's a billionaire, he must be bad. But Richard Branson seems like a pretty cool dude. Like, obviously an aggressive businessman. But, I don't know, I've read both of his autobiographies, and obviously they're written by him, so it's going to be his perspective. But he does seem like a good dude. And he was like, well, I just didn't know. He told me it was like a 17-year-old thought they were 18-year-old sort of situation, right? And what are you going to do? Go look up that, you're going to run a criminal background check on the person? You're going to go Googling their criminal record? No, you just believe people normally. In an email dated the 11th of September 2013, Bronson sent an email to Epstein in which they discussed a business meeting that they'd had that morning. While reading through their conversation, it can be deduced that Epstein's ruined reputation following his 2008 conviction and his recent release from house arrest were topics of conversation. In the email in question, Epstein writes that he appreciated Bronson, sorry, I read that. It was Branson. I thought it was I read Bronson. Wait, this is Richard Branson. Emma's written Richard Bronson, and I just read it as Richard Branson. It is Richard Branson, not Bronson. Branson sent an email to Epstein in which they discussed a business meeting they'd had that morning. While reading through their conversation, it can be deduced that Epstein's ruined reputation following his 2008 conviction and his recent release from house arrest were topics of conversation. In the email in question, Epstein writes that he appreciated Branson's PR advice on the matter. In response, Branson wrote, I think if Bill Gates was willing to say that you'd been a brilliant advisor to him, that you'd slipped up many years ago by sleeping with a 17-and-a-half-year-old woman and that were punished for it, that you've more than learned your lesson and have done nothing that's against the law since, and yes, as a single man, you seem to have a penchant for women, but there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, this is the thing. So he told Richard Branson, it's like, oh, why are you on a sexual offenders register? Because I slept with a 17-and-a-half-year-old. Yeah, you would buy it. Or at least I'd just be like, okay. I mean, it's like, okay, you made a mistake. I don't want to, whatever. Of course, we now know that Epstein didn't just have a penchant for young women, but we have the benefit of hindsight, so we know that it hadn't just been one girl, there had been dozens, and the interactions hadn't exactly been consensual. Now, of course, men like Bill Gates are publicly apologizing and explaining that they regret knowing Epstein at all. Whether they were in fact complicit in his crimes, we'll have to wait for the rest of the documents to be released before we can start the process of prosecuting them. The sad truth is that it's going to take several months for all of the 5 million documents in the Epstein files to be released. And when we eventually do learn more about the people who'd enabled him or were involved in his crimes, we do need to focus on finding justice for the women who'd survived his abuse. They want us to keep the people who actually enabled, facilitated, profited from, or directly participated in their abuse accountable for their crimes. If justice is reduced to headline chasing and political blame games, the real perpetrators will once again slip through the cracks, just as Epstein did for decades. So going forward, we need to start focusing on the evidence we have, since it's the only way to ensure that the release of the files finally serves the victims, rather than the system who so often failed them. All right. From my beginning of being, I think people are jumping the gun on this Lutnick chap a bit. I think he's all right. Gonna find out whether I get completely cancelled for this or not, because everyone seems to hate this guy. He seems all right. That's the end of the episode. Thanks for being here.